Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to take you back to 1975.
Ooh, okay.
To Marple Township, Pennsylvania.
Right.
A seemingly peaceful town where an 8-year-old named Gretchen Harrington vanished on her way to Bible school.
Mm-hmm.
A case that would stay cold for almost 50 years.
Wow.
Our deep dive today relies on one incredibly detailed document.
Okay.
In Spanish.
Interesting.
So it reads like a time capsule of this case.
I see.
And trust me, this isn't just a rehash of the news. We're going to uncover the nuances,
Okay.
the impact on the community, and what made this case so baffling for so long.
Well, what's fascinating about this case is that it reveals how fragile a community's sense of safety can be.
Yeah.
Back in the early 70s,
Right.
Marple Township had a very different atmosphere.
Right.
Kids roamed freely,
Yeah.
playing outside until dark without a second thought.
Yeah. The document really paints a picture of that almost idyllic time,
Right.
which makes Gretchen's disappearance even more shocking.
Aye.
It was a time when kids walking to Bible school alone wouldn't have been unusual.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that today?
Hard to fathom. And that context is crucial to understanding the profound impact this case had on Marple Township.
Right.
It shattered the illusion of safety and innocence that defined the community.
So let's take a step back and walk through that fateful morning.
Okay.
It was August 15th, a seemingly ordinary summer day.
Right. Gretchen left her house on Lawrence Road with her Bible,
Mm-hmm.
heading for the Trinity Church Chapel.
Okay.
Her dad, Harold Harrington, was actually a pastor at one of the congregations meeting there.
Oh, wow.
Another pastor, David Sanra. David Sanra led the other.
That name is going to come up again, isn't it?
He's a key figure in all of this.
Okay.
But for now, it's important to understand that Gretchen usually walked to Bible school with her older sisters.
Right.
However, that morning, they stayed home
Okay.
to help their mother with their newborn baby.
So little Gretchen sets off alone. And this seemingly ordinary walk turns into every parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
When did everyone realize she was missing?
There was some initial confusion because the Bible school was being held at two different churches that morning.
Okay.
Gretchen was supposed to go to a second church after the initial gathering at Trinity Chapel,
Okay.
but never arrived.
And that's when the panic sets in.
Exactly. Her father, Harold, realizing Gretchen was nowhere to be found, started searching along Lawrence Road,
Okay.
thinking maybe she'd taken a detour.
Mm-hmm.
When that failed, he contacted Sandra's wife, Margaret, who was at Trinity Chapel.
And what did she know?
Well, Margaret told Harold that David, her husband,
Right.
had returned to Trinity Chapel after transporting some of the kids to the other church
Okay.
and claimed he hadn't seen Gretchen that day.
Oh, wow.
It's important to remember that the Harringtons and Sanders were close.
Yeah.
They lived near each other, worked in the same field,
Right.
and their daughters were friends.
It's almost unimaginable. The man who would later become the prime suspect was so close to the family.
Right.
What did the police do when they were notified?
At Harold's request, David Sanra himself called the Marple Township Police Department.
Oh, wow.
He provided a very detailed description of Gretchen's clothes.
Okay.
Blue shorts, a white blouse.
Right.
It seems insignificant at the time, but looking back, it's a chilling detail because he later claimed to have never seen her that day.
Wait, so he gave a detailed description of her clothes even though he claimed he never saw her?
Right.
That's a huge contradiction. Why didn't anyone pick up on that in 75?
Unfortunately, the original detective on the case passed away.
Right.
So we may never know why this crucial detail was overlooked at the time.
Oh, wow.
It just goes to show how even seemingly small inconsistencies can become incredibly important later on.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the devil is in the details.
Right.
So while Samara was calling the police, what was the community doing?
As the sun began to set that day, hundreds of volunteers joined the search, desperately combing the woods and distributing flyers with Gretchen's picture.
Wow.
A police helicopter scanned the area from above.
Wow.
But despite their efforts, there was no sign of the little girl.
You mentioned earlier how this case shattered the community's sense of safety.
Right.
What was the overall feeling in Marple Township as the days went by?
Imagine living in a place where kids could roam free, then suddenly being afraid to let them out of your sight.
Yeah.
The carefree atmosphere of the town vanished overnight.
Right.
Parents were terrified, and a sense of dread settled over the community.
The document really emphasizes that shift, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
It wasn't just a missing child, it was a loss of innocence for Marple Township.
People were left wondering how something so horrific could happen in their own backyard.
Yeah.
The fear was palpable.
So as the days turned into weeks, what were the investigators working with? Did they have any leads?
Sadly, they had very little to go on. There were rumors and speculation, but no concrete evidence.
Okay.
Some witnesses reported seeing Gretchen talking to someone in a car.
Okay.
And there were descriptions of a green van that might have been involved.
Okay.
But nothing panned out.
Oh, wow.
And then, 2 months later,
Right.
there was a heartbreaking discovery.
On October 14th, a runner in Ridley Creek State Park came across human remains.
Yes. Clothing found with the body was quickly identified as belonging to Gretchen.
Right.
And dental records tragically confirmed it was her.
Can you imagine the heartbreak her family must have felt?
It's hard to even fathom.
After 2 months of agonizing uncertainty,
Yeah.
their worst fears were confirmed.
And to make matters worse, the autopsy revealed that Gretchen had died from blunt force trauma to the head.
Wow.
There were also suspicions of assault, though that couldn't be definitively proven at the time.
This horrific discovery must have sent shockwaves through the community.
Yeah.
Did the discovery of Gretchen's remains lead to any breakthroughs in the case?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh.
While there was a renewed wave of investigation, with police interviewing countless people and chasing down every lead, the case ultimately went cold.
But even though the investigation stalled, this case clearly never went away.
Right.
It lingered in the minds of the people in Marple Township.
Yeah.
And beyond, the document mentions a journalist,
Right.
Johann Falcon Sullivan,
Yeah.
who was personally affected by Gretchen's disappearance.
Yeah.
And even wrote a book about it.
That's right. Sullivan was only 9 years old when Gretchen was murdered. The case haunted her for years. And as a journalist,
Wow.
she felt compelled to revisit it,
Right.
to try and make sense of the tragedy that had shaken her community.
It seems like this case really stayed with everyone who was touched by it.
Yeah.
But little did they know, decades later, a single phone call would reignite the investigation.
Right.
We'll delve into that in part 2 of our deep dive.
It's often said that cold cases are never truly forgotten, and the Gretchen Harrington case is a perfect example of that. Despite the years that passed, her memory and this unsolved crime lingered in the minds of everyone involved.
Yeah, it's true what they say about time healing all wounds. But some wounds just cut too deep. And sometimes it only takes one small spark to reignite a dormant investigation.
Right.
In this case, that spark came in the form of a phone call, right?
Exactly. In the 2020s, a woman contacted the Marple Township Police Department claiming to have information about Gretchen's disappearance.
Okay.
She mentioned a diary from her childhood
Oh, wow.
that contained details relevant to the case. This tip landed on Sergeant Coffin's desk, who is now leading the Gretchen Harrington investigation.
A childhood diary. You can practically hear the creaking as it's opened for the first time in decades. It sounds like something out of a movie. What did this woman have to say?
The woman, identified in court documents as SF, agreed to meet with investigators.
Okay.
And what she revealed was shocking. She had been friends with Gretchen and her sister Zoe,
Right.
and often slept over at the Sanra house, playing with David Sanra's daughters, Mara and Kristen.
Okay.
SF alleged that during one sleepover,
Right.
when she was just 10 years old, she woke up to find Sanra touching her inappropriately.
That's awful.
She moved and he left the room.
Okay.
But then the next night it happened again.
That's horrifying. And this was only a week before Gretchen disappeared. It's hard to believe that someone who would do something like that was trusted by so many.
It is. And it gets worse.
Yeah.
When SF told Mara, Sandra's daughter,
Right.
about the incidents, Mara's response was something along the lines of, "Yeah, he does that sometimes. And I hear my sister crying in the middle of the night."
That poor girl. This is so disturbing on so many levels. What did SF's parents do?
They were understandably horrified
Right.
and immediately stopped allowing her to sleep over at the Sanra house. Interestingly, the Sanra family moved to Plano, Texas shortly after.
It sounds like there were already red flags around Sanra even back then. But the diary contained another crucial piece of information, didn't it? Something about another girl named Holly.
You're remembering correctly. This is where things get even more interesting. SF's diary entry, dated September 15th, 1975, reads, "Guess what? A man tried to take Holly twice.
Oh, wow.
It's a secret, so I can't tell anyone. but I think it might be the same man that took Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z.
And Mr. Z was a code name for David Sanra.
Yes, SF confirmed to investigators that Mr. Z referred to Sanra.
Okay.
This diary entry, along with SF's account, created a link between Sanra and the attempted abduction of Holly.
Right.
And you might recall those witness reports from back then.
Right.
The ones where people saw Gretchen talking to someone in a car that morning.
Right.
Some of those descriptions actually match one of the vehicles Sanra owned.
This is all starting to add up. So the police had questioned Sanra back in 75, right?
They had interviewed him twice.
Okay.
But he always denied seeing Gretchen that day.
Right.
However, and this is what makes it so unsettling, he was able to give a detailed description of the homemade shorts Gretchen was wearing.
Right.
Despite claiming he'd never seen her.
We talked about that earlier.
Right.
It's one of those details that seems small at the time.
Right.
But becomes a glaring red flag later on.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what could have happened if that inconsistency had been addressed back then.
Absolutely. Looking back, it's easy to connect the dots, but at the time, without the benefit of hindsight, these things can be easily overlooked.
It's a stark reminder that even seemingly insignificant details can be incredibly important in investigation.
Right.
With SF's testimony and this chilling diary entry, investigators finally had a strong case against Sanra.
Yeah.
But by this point, it's 2023,
Right.
and Sanra was no longer in Pennsylvania.
Right.
How did the police track him down after all these years?
Sergeant Coffin contacted the Pennsylvania State Police,
Okay.
who had more resources to handle a multi-state investigation. They found Sanra living in Marietta, Georgia, and he agreed to meet with officers at Cobb County Police Department headquarters in July 2023.
Wow, after almost 5 decades, they were finally confronting their prime suspect.
Right.
I bet the tension in that room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. What happened during the interview?
At first, Sanra denied any involvement in Gretchen's disappearance.
Okay.
But then, investigators revealed the new evidence against him.
Right?
SF's allegations,
Right.
the attempted abduction of Holly, and even claims that he had assaulted his own daughters and a friend of theirs.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot for him to process after all these years.
You can only imagine the range of emotions he must have been going through at that moment. It was a reckoning decades in the making.
You're right. Faced with this mountain of evidence, David Sanra finally broke down and confessed to everything.
He confessed. After all this time, he finally admitted to what he did.
He did. It was a stunning moment for everyone involved.
Yeah.
A long-awaited confession that brought a sense of closure, but also reopened old wounds and brought unimaginable pain to the surface.
It must have been like a tidal wave of emotions for everyone involved. Relief, anger, sadness.
Right.
What did he actually say happened that day?
Sanra confessed to luring Gretchen into his green AMC Rambler van instead of taking her to the second church.
Okay.
He drove her to a wooded area, parked, and asked her to sit beside him. He then made advances towards her.
Oh, gosh.
And in a moment of panic, he killed her.
It's difficult to even comprehend the level of depravity involved in such an act. To think that someone entrusted with the spiritual well-being of a community could be capable of such a horrific crime is simply mind-boggling.
It is a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places and that appearances can be deceiving.
It's a gut-wrenching realization that no community is immune to the darkness that can reside in the hearts of men. What happened after his confession? What was the reaction from those involved?
It was a mix of relief, shock, and anger. For Gretchen's family, it was a long-awaited moment of closure, though tinged with profound sorrow. For others, it was a shattering of the belief that their town was somehow immune to such acts.
The document includes some powerful quotes from people impacted by the case. What did they have to say about it all?
Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer called Sanra every parent's worst nightmare.
Wow.
And praised law enforcement's perseverance,
Right.
stating that justice delayed is not justice denied.
Wow, that's powerful.
Jim Cristaldi, who delivered newspapers to the Harringtons as a boy,
Oh, wow.
spoke about the loss of innocence in Marple Township.
Right.
He said we were innocent, and that completely shattered our innocence.
It's a chilling reminder that even in the most seemingly safe and idyllic places, darkness can lurk. And sometimes it takes decades for the truth to surface.
Right.
What happened to Sanra after his confession?
He was immediately arrested in Georgia and charged with first, second, and third-degree murder, as well as kidnapping and possession of an instrument of crime.
Ow.
He was denied bail and was fighting extradition back to Pennsylvania.
So after almost 50 years, David Sanra was finally going to face justice for what he did to Gretchen Harrington.
Yeah.
But even with his confession, Some unanswered questions remained. Given that Sanra worked as a pastor for decades
Right.
and had access to children in various communities,
Yeah.
investigators began to wonder if there might be other victims out there.
That's a very real concern.
Right.
The document actually ends with this unsettling possibility,
Right.
suggesting that Sandra's confession might just be the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah,
It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
it is.
That this man, hiding behind a mask of piety,
Right.
could have hurt others and gotten away with it for so long.
It's a horrifying thought, and it really speaks to the insidious nature of these kinds of crimes. The fact that he was a trusted figure in the community makes it even more difficult to comprehend.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This case really forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that predators can exist anywhere, even in the places we consider safe and sacred.
It's hard to fathom the ripple effects of this case.
Yeah.
Not just on Gretchen's family, but on the entire community of Marple Township and beyond.
It's like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples just keep expanding outward.
Right.
The document quotes Karen Frank Zetterberg,
Okay.
one of Gretchen's former Bible school classmates,
Right.
saying, "We were taught evil existed,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really understand evil until something like this happens."
Wow.
Those words are so powerful.
Yeah.
They capture the profound impact this case had on an entire generation of children who grew up in the shadow of this unsolved murder.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
You can almost feel the collective trauma that the community endured for decades.
Right.
For those who knew Sanra personally, the betrayal must have been unimaginable. This
Yeah.
wasn't some stranger.
Right.
This was a respected member of the community, a
Yeah.
pastor, a husband, a father.
The document highlights that jarring contrast by mentioning how Sanra's wife actually brought dinner to the Harrington family after Gretchen's disappearance.
Oh,
It's a detail that makes your skin crawl. Knowing what we know now,
it
it
does.
really underscores the level of deception at play.
It's a chilling reminder that monsters can wear many faces. They can be charming, charismatic, and even appear devout. They can blend into our lives and earn our trust,
Right.
making their crimes all the more devastating when they are finally revealed.
It's a tragic lesson, but an important one.
It is.
We need to be vigilant, not just for our own children's safety,
Right.
but for the safety of all children in our communities.
This deep dive has been both fascinating and heartbreaking.
It has.
We've uncovered the story of a seemingly safe community shattered by a horrific crime,
Right.
a mystery that endured for almost 50 years,
Yeah.
and the power of a single tip, a childhood diary,
Right.
and the dedication of investigators to bring a killer to justice.
And while there's a sense of relief that Sanra has been apprehended,
Right.
this case serves as a potent reminder to question our assumptions, to be wary of those who hold positions of power.
Right.
And to always, always listen to children.
It's a reminder that no community is immune to darkness, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, can prevail in the end.
Absolutely.
This case has left us with a lot to ponder.
It has.
How has this deep dive changed your perception of